Hi, thanks for joining me today. My name is Dawn Perez, and I'm one of the education specialists at the Solid Waste Authority of Palm Beach County in West Palm Beach, Florida. Today, what we're going to be doing is exploring our trail system and learning about the different animals and plants along our trail. But before we get into that, let's talk a little bit about the Solid Waste Authority. So the Solid Waste Authority of Palm Beach County is a local government agency that was created in 1975 to manage all of Palm Beach County's waste. That would include garbage, recycling, home chemicals, and biosolids, or your number two. We have a lot of facilities that manage all of these wastes, and we're very, very unique. And we have to be because we have a very large population here in Palm Beach County. We have about 1.4 million people that live in Palm Beach County. And on average, each one of us creates about 12 pounds of solid waste per day. So if we do that math and take the 1.4 million people and multiply it by 12 pounds, here at the Solid Waste Authority of Palm Beach County, we get almost 17 million pounds of solid waste per day. 17 million pounds. Wow. For you guys to visualize that, that would be like a football field piled up to 27 feet high, which is almost as high as the goalposts. So again, that's how much we get at the Solid Waste Authority in just one day. So we have to be very unique and efficient about how we manage that waste. And we have different facilities to manage those wastes. Two of those facilities you can see in the background here. We have our renewable energy facilities, and that's where we actually burn the garbage and turn it into electricity or generate electricity. So that's pretty cool. But again, today, what we're going to be learning about is our trail system. And we're going to take a virtual trek through our trails and learn about the animals and plants that live there. So come on, let's get started. Welcome to our Greenway Trail System. What you're seeing here is part of our butterfly loop. Now, when you think about recycling and garbage, you might not necessarily think about nature trails, right? Well, here at the Solid Waste Authority of Palm Beach County, we do have about 5 miles of nature trails that are open to the public from sunrise to sunset 7 days a week. And the reason that we have these trails and this conservation area is because back in the 1980s, when we were looking to build our landfills, we had this area surveyed by wildlife agencies. And when they surveyed this area, they found an endangered species of bird called an Everglades snailkite. And so we weren't going to kick the snailkite out of its home. So what we did was we moved our landfill somewhere else on our footprint, and we turned this area into a conservation area. So now we have about 300 acres of conservation area, and like I said, about 5 miles of trails open to the public from sunrise to sunset. So today what we're going to do is explore the butterfly loop, which is one of our 4 trails. Now the first thing I'm going to point out, you'll notice this big hill over here, right? Does anyone know what this is? This is our landfill. So we have 2 landfills, and this is one of them. And we call it a sanitary landfill, not a dump. I know a lot of people have nicknames for landfills. Maybe they call it Mount Trashmore, Garbage Mountain, or the dump. But here at the Solid Waste Authority of Palm Beach County, we don't like to use the word dump. We say dump is a bad 4-letter word, because a dump is pretty much just a hole in the ground that people throw garbage, and there's no rules, there's no regulation, and it's bad for the environment. And before the 1970s, we didn't know that. But as I told you before, the Solid Waste Authority was created in 1975. And so what we have are called sanitary or clean landfills. Now, the reason that this landfill is sanitary is because before we put anything in that landfill, we put down 2 really thick liners of plastic. Then we put down a collection system, and it collects something called leachate, which is a fancy word for garbage juice. We don't want that garbage juice getting into the environment and into the groundwater, because that's our drinking water. So the thick liners of plastic and the leachate collection system allow that not to happen, okay? They protect the environment. After we put those things down, then we'll put a protective layer of soil, typically a clay. And once all of that has been laid down, then we'll start to fill the landfill. What's going in our landfills now is mostly ashes from that burning process, from combusting the garbage and turning it into electricity. Okay, and we build our landfills kind of, you can think of it like a garbage lasagna. So we build it in alternating layers. We have a layer of protective soil, then we put the ash or the garbage that can't be burned, then another layer of protective soil, etc., until we build it up to about 160 feet above sea level. That's where we're permitted to build it up to. We can't go any further. And then we lay it with another liner on top. We actually heat seal that liner and cap it off, and then we grow grass on it and we give it back to the community. Okay, so if you go to Dyer Park, which is around the corner from us, that used to be an old landfill. And down in Lantana, off of Lantana Road, we have Park Ridge Golf Course, which also used to be an old landfill. So that's pretty cool. That's what we do with our old landfills. We actually turn them into recreational uses for the public. Now we're going to move on. And what you see here is one of our cheeky huts. So a lot of the times when people say this, they say tiki huts, right? Well, tiki huts are actually the Polynesian version of this. What we have in Florida are called cheeky huts. And this cheeky hut is overlooking Lake Altman, which was part of a dredging project back in the 1980s. The cheeky huts in Florida are created by Seminole Native Americans. So a company that has Seminole Native American background, they have a long tradition of building these. This used to be their house and their shelter when there were a lot more Native Americans in the area. And so here's Lake Altman. We're getting a nice view of the lake. And right here, I'd like to point out another building. So that is our renewable energy facility number 2. So we have 2 renewable energy facilities, and these buildings are where we combust or burn Palm Beach County's garbage and turn it into electricity. That electricity is then used to power all of our buildings off of North Jog Road, and then the rest, the excess, is sold to FP&L, and it goes out onto the power grid. So that means next time you turn on a light at home or at school, think about this. It could be powered by your own garbage. How cool is that? So what we're going to do now is we're going to take a look at our 4 main habitats that we have on our trail system. And the first habitat we're looking at is called a pine flatwoods. So looking at this picture, why do you think it would be called a pine flatwoods? Well, if you guess that we have a lot of pine trees, that's right. So this area is primarily made up of pines, and the pine trees that we have on our trails are slash pines. They are native to Florida. Now, pine flatwoods, this is a very dry habitat, and fire is very common in this type of environment. Every 5 to 7 years or so, there would typically be a fire. Unfortunately, at the Solid Waste Authority, we can't have prescribed burns of this area because this is too close to our buildings. Now, because this habitat, the pine flatwoods, would have fire in this area, the animals and the plants that live in this area have to be fire resistant, right? So they have many adaptations to be fire resistant. One of them is something that we just saw, this slash pine. You saw that their pine needles were up high, right? Really, really high in the canopy. So pine needles, if you haven't tried this before, they actually catch fire very quickly. Try it next time you go camping, throw a bunch of dried pine needles into the fire. They catch very quickly, and so that is why this tree has adapted to have them growing at the top so that they don't catch fire. They're all the way up there. Now, by looking at this tree and taking a closer look, can you guess another adaptation that it has to resist fire? If you look at it closely, there are pine cones, okay? And these pine cones hold seeds. This is another adaptation that the slash pine has. These pine cones, when it's hot outside or there's a fire, it actually triggers them to release their seeds, to open up and release their seeds, like the top pine cone there. But when it's cooler out, the pine cones actually stay closed. So they're not open like that top one. So that is another adaptation that the slash pine has. And then the last adaptation that we're going to discuss today, take a closer look at the tree again. What do you guys think might be another adaptation? Well, it's the bark. If you notice here, it's very flaky and it peels off really easily. So if there's a fire, what happens is the layers of the bark are going to flake off and peel off and burn off, but the center of the tree, the heartwood, is going to remain intact. And so this tree is going to survive that fire. So that's another adaptation that the slash pines have. Now, as we focus in closely, you'll also notice that we see these green spots on the tree, right? Does anybody know what these green spots are called? This is actually something called lichen. I don't know if you've heard of lichen before, but I'm going to tell you a little bit about it. So lichen is a great example of a symbiotic relationship in nature. It's actually an example of something called mutualism, which is when two organisms benefit from their interaction. So, can you guess the two organisms that make up lichen? They are algae and fungus. So the algae provides the fungus with food through photosynthesis, just like other plants. And the fungus provides the algae with a home or shelter. So we like to say Alice algae and Freddie fungus took a liking to each other. So those are the two organisms that make up lichen, and they have a mutualistic relationship. And right here, what we're focusing on, this one is called branching lichen. Now there's three types of lichen. There's shrubby, there's branching, and there's crusting. And this is branching lichen, which kind of reminds me of almost like coral a little bit. You can see some more lichen on the tree. We've got some, looks like shrubby here. We have some crusting, some more branching over here. So now we're going to focus on another Florida native, okay? Oh, first we're going to take a look at this branching algae again. That's a beautiful example right there. Taking a closer look here too at the lichen. Okay. So now we're going to focus on another native Florida plant. This right here is called a cocoa plum, and you might have seen this before, and it does have these little berries. Now, we have two different kinds of cocoa plum on our trails, the red and the white. Which kind of cocoa plum do you think this is? I'll give you a hint. Look at the berries. What do you think? Well, that would be a white cocoa plum. So, by the way, these berries are edible. However, we obviously do not suggest you eat or touch anything unless you know what it is 100%. Okay, we do have some plants on our trail system that can be poisonous, can give you rashes and things like that. So again, please don't try to eat anything or touch anything where you don't know what it is. But this is our white cocoa plum. So take a closer look at those berries. And then what we're going to do now is we're going to continue down the trail. Okay. So let's go. So what we're looking at now, does anybody know this layer of the forest, by the way? This is actually the canopy, okay? So up top, we have the canopy. And why would these leaves of these trees and these needles be all the way at the top of the canopy, besides what I told you about slash pine before? Well, they're gonna be up high because that's where the sunlight is, right? And they wanna get as close as they can to the sunlight so they can collect it and use that energy in the process of photosynthesis in order to make their food. And now we're gonna move on to another one of our main habitats. This here is our cypress swamp, okay? So it's made up mostly of cypress trees, as you can see here. And these cypress trees have little knobs on them called knees. And that's what we're looking at here. So those are cypress knees. And scientists aren't 100% sure why they have these knees. Some of them think it could be for stability. So when the water level comes up in this area, that it keeps the tree stable from falling over. Other people think that maybe it's how they get oxygen to the tree and to their roots when the water level comes up, but they're not 100% sure. This is one way, 100% though, that you can know you're looking at a cypress tree. You'll also notice as we glance over the cypress trees that there are lichen on these as well. We can see those crusting lichens and those branching lichens also growing on the cypress trees. And welcome to our beautiful freshwater marsh. So this is our freshwater marsh, another one of our habitats. And as you can see here, the marsh is made of a lot of grasses. So that's the difference between a swamp and a marsh. A swamp has a lot of trees, a marsh has a lot of grasses, okay? And the Solid Waste Authority's marsh has an abundance of something called spike brush, which is a type of grass. Now, believe it or not, this is a wetland system, right? But even though it's a wetland system, it has a dry season. So there are times when our marsh is dry, and you can see the water level is very low here, right? That alligator is sunning itself and there's barely any water there, okay? So that is an American alligator resting right there. And next to it, you'll notice that there is some water, okay? So this alligator has made what we call a gator hole. And a gator hole is when they dig the soil and then it rains and it fills in with water. And it really helps the alligator cool off, but it also helps other animals in the marsh, like fish, crayfish, insects, other things that would live in the water survive through the dry season because these alligators dig these gator holes. And so this is one of the reasons that alligators are known as a keystone species. Have you ever heard that term? What is a keystone species? Well, it means that many other animals depend on the alligator, and that if the alligator were to disappear or go extinct, it would really drastically change this habitat, and the habitat could even collapse, okay? And the animals that are in this habitat, other than the American alligator, would suffer. So the alligator is very, very important to this habitat. And right now, what this alligator is out doing is sunning itself, right? So it must be cool and it wants to get some sun and heat up. It is cold-blooded, okay, or ectothermic, which means it cannot control its own body temperature like us humans. So that's what it's doing there. Now we're gonna move on, and I wanna see if you guys can point out the baby alligator. So there is a baby alligator here, and we're gonna look closely and try to find it. Can you find it? There it is, it just moved, and I just saw it. But that was kind of hard to find right away, right? So that's because it has those stripes. Those stripes on the baby gator allow it to camouflage or blend in with the grass. And so it does this so that it can escape predators, because when they're that small, they can't defend themselves. But as they get older and they get larger, they start to lose those stripes and turn a darkish green color. Okay, and that's because then they can defend themselves when they get that big. Now this baby is probably less than a year old. And I'm guessing that the alligator, the big alligator we just saw, is probably this baby gator's mother. Because usually when there's a baby gator, you won't find mom too far away. Oh, look at how cute it is. You'll also notice in this shot that we have a nice purple plant over here. That's called pickerel weed. Really pretty purple flower. I also like to think of it as nature's candy. If you were to take off the flower and pull it out and suck on its stem area, it actually is sweet. But again, if you don't 100% know what it is, please do not touch it or try to eat it. All right, so here is another view of our renewable energy facility 2 and its stack. Now, this stack is very tall. It's 320 feet tall. And as you can see, there isn't smoke coming out of the top, right? We don't see any black or dark material coming out, just steam. And that's because we have a very high-tech pollution control system to clean the chemicals from that burning process before the steam comes out of the stack. We're actually the greenest, cleanest renewable energy facility in North America, and we're the first one built in the last 20 years or so. So that's pretty neat. Now, look at this beautiful view of the canopy and the cypress trees and the cocoa plum. This is just a great example of how industry and nature can coexist. So industry would be us, the Solid Waste Authority of Palm Beach County, and obviously nature would be what you're looking at now. And we both support each other, and the Solid Waste Authority is very green. We are environmental stewards. So again, a great example of how industry and nature can coexist. There's some more great shots of the canopy there. So this picture that we're looking at here is a picture of something called sawgrass, which you can also find in our freshwater marsh. Take a closer look. Do you know why it's called sawgrass? Look at those jagged edges. So those jagged edges are why this plant is called sawgrass. And if you were to run your fingers against these jagged edges, it would be sharp and you would probably cut yourself. But if you were to go along with the edges, you would probably be okay. So this is almost like if anybody's gone to a touch tank and rubbed a shark's scales. If you go with the scales, you're fine. But if you go against them, you'll cut yourself. Same kind of thing with sawgrass. And this plant actually allowed the natives to get away from Spaniards back when Spain was building settlements in Florida. So it was actually a resource for them. They knew how to move through it. They could get away and protect themselves. Now here we're in another habitat. This is our hydric hammock. And the hydric hammock, its canopy is made mostly of cabbage palms. So we do see a lot of palm fronds here and cabbage palms right here and over here. And then on the bottom in the understory, there's a lot of ferns and other plants that make up the understory and grasses. So the understory is the lowest layer of the forest here. But one thing I did want to point out, do you see that big brown mass hanging right there? And in the background too over here? This is an invasive plant called the Old World climbing fern. Now, invasive, I said invasive. What does that mean? Well, invasive is something that comes from somewhere else, right? It's not from Florida, not from this area, and it outcompetes and it harms our natives. So that's what invasive is. Now, native means that it's from this area, okay? It's from Florida. So I like to explain this concept this way. Those of you that are watching, who of you are born in Florida? If you're born in Florida and you live in Florida now, you are a native, okay? You're from here. Who of us watching was not born in Florida? They were born in another state or maybe another country, and then they came here and now they're living in Florida. Well, I know I am. I'm originally from Rhode Island, and now I'm living here in Florida. So I would be an exotic, okay? I'm here, I moved here, but I'm not really harming anyone. And then you have an invasive. So any of you that moved here, did you kick a family out of its home, eat its food, sleep in its bed? No, right? I'm sure you didn't. But if you were an invasive species, that's what would happen, okay? You would outcompete the natives, you would take over the habitat. And so the old world climbing fern is an invasive. It's originally from Southeast Asia, and it actually takes over trees and grows and takes over them to the point where it actually collapses whole tree islands in the Everglades. It also blocks out the sunlight and other things that that tree needs to survive. So this old world climbing fern is not only an example of an invasive species, it's also a great example of a parasitic relationship in nature. So a parasitic relationship is another type of symbiotic relationship. And in this relationship, one organism benefits and the other one is harmed. Okay, so that old world climbing fern is a parasite to that slash pine because it's going to benefit, it's going to get the sunlight and the nutrients and the things it needs, but that tree is not. The other thing, the other reason that this fern is kind of bad is because it grows so fast and it can get so high that it actually creates a ladder for fire. So remember in the pine flatwoods, we talked about that it was a very dry habitat and that fire can occur naturally in that habitat. Well, if fire were to occur here, it would very easily climb up that vine, or that fern rather, and it would take hold of that tree and that tree would not survive. So that's kind of another downside of the old world climbing fern. Now, at the Solid Waste Authority of Palm Beach County, we are taking measures to fight against this fern. You'll notice that this is brown, and that's because it's actually dead. We are treating the old world climbing fern and other invasive plants on our property. What we've done here is we have sprayed this with a special pesticide that works against that fern, and then we puppy cut them. That's what they call it, when you cut it about chest height. And so hopefully we're keeping the old world climbing fern at bay, but they do grow back really fast. So we have to keep monitoring our trails very often to make sure that it's not taking over and it's not recovering. And again, we're looking at this beautiful canopy. So one of the last things I want to point out is that we actually have a trail camera program, and this is one of our trail cameras. So every month we do post videos of critters that we find on the trails. And we post them on our Facebook page as well as other social media pages and our website. So if you want to see our past trail videos, you can always visit swa.org/trails to check those out. We've caught all sorts of cool animals, including bobcats, bobcat cubs, coyotes, armadillos, and baby deer, which are also known as fawn. So there's so many cool animals out there, and we've caught a lot. So definitely go check those out. Hi, welcome back. I hope you had a lot of fun learning about our trail systems and the animals and plants that live there. Hopefully, this has inspired you to get outside and enjoy nature. Maybe you'll even take photographs of some animals or plants that you see in your backyard or your neighborhood and send them to us. And of course, we always encourage you to come out onto our trail system, which is open from sunrise to sunset. It's so beautiful. Please come out and enjoy our trails. So, thanks again for tuning in today. If you like this program, please like and share with your family and friends. And if you happen to have any questions about anything you've seen today, go ahead and post them below. Or you can email us at education@swa.org. And just a reminder before you go, we do have programs like this every weekday, Monday through Friday at 11 a.m. So if you've missed any of our recordings or you'd like to see our upcoming schedule, please visit swa.org/education to look those up. Thanks again and have a great day. Bye.